9 months after Oluwaseun's encounter with the river goddess, the village of Adira was buzzing with excitement. Oluwaseun was about to give birth, and everyone was curious about the child that had been so long in coming. As the sun rose on a warm morning, Oluwaseun's cries echoed through their small hut. Adebayo paced outside, his heart racing with worry and hope. "Push, Oluwaseun. Push," the village midwife urged. With a final, powerful effort, Oluwaseun brought her son into the world. The midwife cleaned the baby and wrapped him in a soft cloth. "It's a boy," she announced, smiling as she handed the child to Oluwaseun. Adebayo rushed in, his eyes wide with wonder. "Our son," he whispered, gently touching the baby's cheek. But as they cuddled their newborn, a strong, fishy smell filled the hut. The midwife's nose wrinkled, and she stepped back. "What is that smell?" she asked, looking around. Oluwaseun and Adebayo exchanged worried glances. This was the curse the river goddess had mentioned. It's our son," Oluwaseun said softly. He was blessed by the river goddess, but with this smell as well. The midwife's eyes widened. "Blessed by the river goddess? But why does he smell like this?" Adebayo stood tall, protective of his family. "It doesn't matter. He's our son, and we love him." The midwife nodded, but her discomfort was clear. As she left, Oluwaseun and Adebayo knew their challenges were just beginning. They named their son Dayo, meaning joy has arrived despite the smell. Dayo was indeed a joy to his parents. He grew quickly, strong and healthy, just as the goddess had promised. But as Dayo got older, the smell didn't go away. If anything, it seemed to get stronger. So when Dayo was 3, Oluwaseun took him to the village well to fetch water. Other women were there with their children. As Oluwaseun approached, the women covered their noses and moved away. "What's that awful smell?" one woman asked loudly. "It's Oluwaseun's boy," another whispered. "He always smells like that." Oluwaseun's cheeks burned with shame, but she held her head high. "Come, Dayo," she said, taking her son's hand. "Let's get our water and go home." Dayo looked up at his mother, his big brown eyes full of confusion. "Mama, why did they move away? Don't they like us?" Oluwaseun's heart broke. She knelt down, looking into her son's eyes. "They just don't understand how special you are, my love. Don't worry about them." But Dayo did worry. As he got older, he noticed more and more how people reacted to him. Children his age refused to play with him. Adults wrinkled their noses and turned away when he came near. One day, when Dayo was 7, he came home crying. Adebayo was mending his fishing nets, but he put them down immediately when he saw his son's tears. "Dayo, what's wrong?" he asked, pulling the boy into his arms. "The other kids won't let me play with them," Dayo sobbed. "They say I stink and that no one wants to be near me." Adebayo felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. He had to be strong for his son. "Listen to me, Dayo," he said firmly. "You are a blessing from the river goddess herself. You're strong and smart and kind. Those children don't know what they're missing." But Dayo shook his head. "I don't want to be blessed if it means everyone hates me. I want to be normal. I were any normal." And Oluwaseun, who had been listening from the doorway, came in and joined the hug. "We love you, Dayo. You are perfect just the way you are." But Dayo pulled away. "Your love isn't enough," he cried. "I want friends. I want people to like me." He ran out of the hut, leaving his parents staring after him, their hearts heavy. As Dayo grew, life in the village became harder for the whole family. People whispered behind their backs. Some even suggested that Dayo was cursed, not blessed. Adebayo found it harder to sell his fish. People claimed they could smell Dayo on the catch, even though Dayo never touched his father's work. Oluwaseun lost some of her friends. Women she had known since childhood now avoided her, not wanting the smell to cling to their clothes. But through it all, Oluwaseun and Adebayo stood strong. They loved their son fiercely and did their best to protect him from the cruelty of others. When Dayo turned 12, things came to a head. The village was preparing for the annual harvest festival. Usually, all the children would participate in the dance to thank the gods for a good harvest. Deo was excited. He had been practicing the dance moves for weeks, hoping this would be his chance to fit in. On the day of the festival, Dio put on his best clothes and joined the other children, but as soon as he approached, the other kids started to complain. "No, not him," one boy shouted. "He'll stink up the whole dance." "We can't dance with him," a girl added. "The gods will be angry if we bring that smell to them." The dance leader, an older woman named Mama Folik, looked uncomfortable. She turned to Dio with pity in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Dio," she said, "but maybe it's best if you don't dance this year." Dio felt like his heart was breaking. He ran home, tears streaming down his face. When Oluwaseun and Adebayo heard what happened, they were furious. They went to the village chief to complain. Chief Ogundi, Adebayo said, his voice shaking with anger, "Our son has been unfairly treated. He has every right to participate in the festival." The chief looked troubled. "Adebayo, Oluwaseun, you know I have great respect for you both, but the other parents have complained. They say Doyo's smell will offend the gods." "That's ridiculous," Oluwaseun cried. "Dio is blessed by the river goddess herself. How could he offend the gods?" But the chief shook his head. "I'm sorry, but for the peace of the village, it's better if Dio doesn't participate." Oluwaseun and Adebayo left the chief's hut, feeling defeated. When they got home, they found Dio sitting by the river, throwing stones into the water. "Dio," Oluwaseun said gently, "we're so sorry about what happened." Dio didn't look at them. "It's not your fault," he said flatly. "It's mine. I'm the one who stinks." Adebayo sat down next to his son. "You don't stink, Dio. You smell like the river, and that's nothing to be ashamed of." But Dio shook his head. "I hate it. I hate being different. I hate being alone." His parents exchanged worried glances. They had always feared this day would come. "What if," Oluwaseun hesitated, then continued, "what if we tried to find the river goddess again? Maybe she could remove the smell." Dio's eyes lit up with hope. "Could we? Could she really do that?" Adebayo looked unsure. "It's dangerous, Dio. Your mother barely survived the tasks last time." "But I have to try," Dio pleaded. "I can't live like this anymore. Please, Papa and Mama, and let me try to find the river goddess." Oluwaseun and Adebayo looked at each other, a silent conversation passing between them. Finally, Adebayo nodded. "All right," he said, "we'll try. But we'll go as a family. I won't let either of you face those dangers alone." The next day, they prepared for their journey. The whole village watched as they packed their things, whispering and pointing. As they were about to leave, an old woman approached them. It was Mama Folik, the dance leader. "Where are you going?" she asked. "So we're going to find the river goddess," Dio said boldly. "I'm going to ask her to take away my smell." Mama Folik's eyes widened. "The river goddess? But that's just a legend." Oluwaseun shook her head. "No, she's real. She's the one who blessed Dio." Mama Folik looked thoughtful. "Then may the gods go with you. And Dio," she added softly, "I'm sorry about the dance. I should have stood up for you." Dio nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Then, with a deep breath, he turned and led his parents out of the village. Their journey was long and hard. They walked for days, following the river deeper and deeper into the forest. Dio's smell actually helped them at times, keeping dangerous animals away. Finally, they reached the clearing where Oluwaseun had met the river goddess years ago. The pool of water was just as she remembered it, eerily still and clear. "Great river goddess," Oluwaseun called out, "please, we need your help." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the water began to swirl. The river goddess rose from the pool, her eyes fixed on Dio. "So," she said, her voice like rushing water, "you have returned. And this must be the child I blessed." Dio stepped forward, his heart pounding. "River goddess," he said, his voice shaking, "I've come to ask you to take away your blessing. I don't want to smell like the river anymore." The goddess looked surprised. "Take away my blessing? But child, do you not know how special you are?" Dio felt tears in his eyes. "I don't feel special. I feel alone. Nobody wants to be near me because of how I smell." The river goddess's expression softened. "Oh child, my blessing was never meant to bring you pain, but removing it is not a simple thing. Are you sure this is what you want?" Dio nodded firmly. "Yes, more than anything." The goddess looked at Oluwaseun and Adebayo. "And you? Do you support your son's decision?" Adebayo stepped forward. "We love our son, smell and all, but we want him to be happy. If this is what he needs, then yes, we support him." The river goddess was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Very well. But as before, this will require a task. Dio must prove his worth." "What must I do?" Dio asked eagerly. "You must spend 3 days and nights alone in the forest," the goddess said. "You will have no food or water except what you can find for yourself. So if you can survive this, I will remove the smell." Dio's eyes widened in fear, but he nodded. "I'll do it." Oluwaseun and Adebayo looked terrified. "But he's just a boy," Oluwaseun protested. The goddess shook her head. "This is his task. You cannot help him." Dio turned to his parents. "I can do this," he said bravely. "I have to." With heavy hearts, Oluwaseun and Adebayo hugged their son goodbye. They watched as he walked into the forest alone, his small figure soon swallowed up by the trees. The next 3 days were the longest of Oluwaseun and Adebayo's lives. They waited by the pool, praying to every god they knew for their son's safety. Dio, meanwhile, was facing challenges he had never imagined. He had to find his own food, figuring out which berries were safe to eat and how to catch fish with his bare hands. He had to find safe places to sleep, away from predators, and he had to battle his own loneliness and fear. But Dio was stronger than he knew. His life of isolation had taught him to be self-reliant, and his parents' love had given him courage. He survived on berries and small fish, made a shelter from leaves and branches, and sang to himself to keep his spirits up. On the third night, as Dio huddled in his makeshift shelter, he heard a noise. A large shape moved in the darkness, and Dio's heart raced with fear. But then he saw it was a leopard, just like the one his mother had told him about. The leopard approached Dio, its eyes glowing in the dark. But instead of attacking, it lay down next to him, just as it had done with Oluwaseun years ago. Dio, remembering his mother's story, carefully reached out to touch the leopard's fur. It was soft and warm. The leopard started to purr, a deep rumbling sound that made Dio feel safe for the first time in days. "Thank you," he whispered to the leopard. "I'm not alone after all." As the sun rose on the 4th day, Dio emerged from the forest. He was dirty, scratched, and hungry, but his eyes shone with a new confidence. Oluwaseun and Adebayo ran to him, wrapping him in a tight hug. "Oh Dio," Oluwaseun cried, "we were so worried." The river goddess appeared, looking at Dio with approval. "You have passed the test, young one. You have shown courage, resourcefulness, and kindness. Are you still sure you want me to remove the smell?" Dio hesitated. His time in the forest had changed him. He had faced his fears and survived. He had made a friend in the leopard, who hadn't cared about his smell at all. I'm not sure anymore," he said slowly. The goddess smiled. "Perhaps the problem was never your smell, Dio. Perhaps it was that you didn't believe in yourself. The smell was a part of you, but it did not define you." Dio thought about this. Then he straightened his shoulders and looked the goddess in the eye. "You're right. I don't want you to remove the smell. It's part of who I am. If people don't like it, that's their problem, not mine." Oluwaseun and Adebayo beamed with pride. The goddess nodded approvingly. "Wise decision, young one. But let me offer you this. I cannot remove the smell, but I can change it slightly. Instead of smelling like fish, you will smell like water lilies. It will still be strong, but perhaps more pleasant to others. Would you like that?" Dio grinned. "That sounds perfect." With a wave of her hand, the goddess changed Dio's scent. Suddenly, the air was filled with the sweet smell of water lilies. As they prepared to leave, the goddess had one last thing to say. "Remember, Dio, true strength comes from accepting yourself, not from changing to please others." Dio nodded, feeling a new sense of peace wash over him. When they returned to the village, people were amazed by the change in Dio. Not just his new, pleasant smell, but his confidence and strength. Children who had once avoided him now wanted to hear about his adventure in the forest. Mama Folik approached them, smiling widely. Dio, she said, we're having another dance next week to celebrate the new season. Would you like to lead it? Dio's face lit up. I'd love to. As Oluwashon and Adebayo watched their son being surrounded by his new friends, they felt a deep sense of gratitude. Their journey had been long and hard, but it had led them here to this moment of joy. That night, as they sat by the river, Adebayo turned to Oluwasan. Do you ever regret going to the river goddess all those years ago? He asked. Oluwasan looked at Dio, who was teaching some other boys how to fish. She smiled. Not for a single moment, she said. Every challenge was worth it for him. Adebayo nodded, putting his arm around his wife. They sat there together, watching their son, the blessed child of the river, finally finding his place in the world. Here comes the end of our story. Please comment and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more stories.